2500, 2600, a space odyssey.
Alan Pearlman had always been this fascinating figure. I love the 2600, love the Odyssey, love the 2500. That's the only real synth that I really want, which is way out of our league now. But obviously ARP's demise was in the 80s, and Alan had been this kind of very almost reclusive figure. And in fact, I think the only time I'd ever heard anything from him was in Mark Vail's book The Synthesizer, which was an amazing resource. So in my head I was like, if I could get to Alan Pearlman, that would be amazing. It would be a really amazing achievement to kind of hear the story from the horse's mouth. And again, through Mark, I contacted Mark Vail, who was in touch with Alan, who gave me his phone number and arranged for me to talk to him. And that was amazing. I was like a true, proper fanboy, really nervous. It was like, oh, you don't know me. I'm just this kind of guy from the UK who loves everything you do, and I want to do this little documentary. And he was amazingly humble. In fact, he said to me, I'm kind of like, I'm nothing special. I'm like the man behind the curtain in The Wizard of Oz, which sort of really intrigued me. And I think at the time he was approaching 90. And I think he, after a couple of conversations, he said, yeah, okay, I'll talk to you. So Chris and I got on a plane and flew to Boston immediately to record, what turned out to be a real life-changing interview for me. We spent a day with him and we got on really, really well, to the point where him and his wife Buena asked us to stay for supper that evening. And we were talking about, his favourite films, which turns out to be Young Frankenstein. He's a huge comedy fan, and the music that he liked and stuff like that. We'd kind of done the synth stuff, so now it was kind of more personal. And at one point we said, have you ever been to the UK? And he said, yeah, once in the 70s. It was very stuffy. We were like, what do you mean? And he said, well, we stayed in this kind of posh hotel and we'd just flown in and we were hungry and we wanted to go and eat in the restaurant. But we have a daughter, Dina, who was obviously young at the time, and we couldn't get into the restaurant without having the aperitif in the bar beforehand, but we couldn't get into the bar because Dina was underage. Of course, Chris and I were like, that sounds very kind of British 70s stuffiness. So we just casually asked, so what did you do? And Buena, Alan's wife, said, I did what kept me alive as a child. I elbowed my way to the food. And we were like, what do you mean? And she just looked at us and said, 3 concentration camps, my dear. And our jaws just hit the floor. And then she told us her story. So, which for me was just mind-blowing. And we left every interview going, wow. But with this one, I don't think we stopped going, wow, for hours.
A space odyssey, what? What's that? 2000. What's that? What am I supposed to say there? Yeah. Yeah, that's what it says anyway. But is it EMS or EMS?
Hey everybody, welcome. So welcome to the 2021 edition of Archives Live, live from ARP Foundation, Alan R. Pearlman Foundation, New York. We will be, of course, taking these lovely instruments at some point to our new brick and mortar location, but that it will be discussed at another time. I am very, very, very pleased to introduce Dave Spiers. It has been a long time coming. Dave Spiers and I have been very good friends, though we've never met face to face, which is kind of crazy. But we've been conversing now. It got to be 7 years. First on the email, then on the phone, then through various modalities of video conferencing. And he is finally here with us today to talk about his life as a synthesist, musician, sound designer, and of course his role in producing the documentary Bright Sparks. Oh, and let me not forget his software company, which includes a version of the Odyssey called Oddities. So we have so much to talk about, and I love talking to you. It's definitely up there with some of my favorite discussions in the ARP realm and beyond. So I'm going to give the screen to you. Hopefully this is working right. And I just want to start by asking you a couple of questions that I ask just about every visitor here, because I think of this as a studio visit. We're my studio to your studio. And tell us a little bit about how you got into this synth mess in the first place.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. Well, thank you very much for having me. So I started out as a pianist. I mean, pretty unremarkable pianist. Did the grades and all of that kind of stuff. But I think it was Stevie Wonder's Talking Book that made me think, what makes those sounds? And that whole album just grabbed me as a kid. And I'd kind of done a little bit of the prog rock routine, listened to the kind of Yes and Emerson, Lake and Palmer stuff. But that struck me as, it was basically classical music with synthesizers, and it didn't kind of grab me in the same way that the kind of early Stevie stuff grabbed me. So I annoyed my piano teacher constantly. I don't want to do these grades thing anymore. I want to learn these pieces. And I hassled my parents for a synthesizer, and it was unsuccessful. But what I did do was there was one local music store that had some synthesizers, and I used to have to go to school on a Saturday morning, but that gave me kind of Wednesday afternoon off, and I'd just get on the train and go in and really just annoy the guy who was working in the store and get him to show me what he could. And I just noodled around on the pretense that I'd be back on Saturday to buy something, just lying through my teeth. Oddly, I recently I kind of came into contact with him again recently, and I apologized profusely, and I said, "You're welcome to have as long in our studio as I wasted the time for you as a sales guy back in those days." Hopefully after the COVID thing, he'll take me up on that. But I didn't get my hands on a synth. I kind of rented a couple for gigs that I was doing in bands in the 70s, just school stuff really. And then I went to the States in 1979, and that was a massive road trip.
I would say
and the first thing was like shopping malls were like, they didn't exist here at that time. So for me, the idea of visiting a shopping mall in every kind of town that we visited or city was really exciting. You can drag me there now with wild horses, but at the time it was really exciting. And then obviously the first place I visited was, I got to get my hands on one of these synths. And I just went straight to the music stores, and the guys were so cool, this is like 70s America. And they just took the time to show me. So I started in LA learning how to use the ARPs, because amazingly ARPs were really much more ubiquitous than any other synth at the time in music stores. And by the time I finished the trip running out of money and energy in Detroit, I'd learned how to vaguely use the 2600.
Dave, I'm sorry to interrupt.
And that was it.
I got to interrupt you for a second. We're hearing a little bit of echo somehow.
Okay, I'm turned down here, so I'm not coming out of my speakers.
Huh. Interesting.
I can try and swap to another microphone if that helps.
Yeah, let's try that. Can you hear without the headset? Just wondering.
Not. Does that work?
It works for me.
Or are we still echoing? It works for me.
Ooh, now we have an echo with me. Can you hear me?
Let me. I'll try one other mic.
Okay.
Let's try that. Is that one better?
Hello. Say something.
Is that one better? Does that one work?
Chris, how's it going? Chris, can you hear it? Robbie, what do you think? Is it better?
Or is it worse?
Can you hear us at all?
Okay, yeah, Chris is saying here that there's a little bit of doubling, still echoing. Oh, damn.
It's the beauty of live stream.
Yeah, there's always something.
I wonder if I put on my headset, but I might have to restart everything, and that'll be a big drag.
I'll go back to my other mic because it's better quality.
Okay. Chris says
That's
it's a lucky thing we got a lot of people here that understand what to do. 'Cause I know. How's that, everybody? All right, so keep talking. They said it was light. Oh, tight or light? Tight doubling effect. All right, so I'm going to just try something on my end. Okay, Michael John says it's not too bad. You want to keep going?
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah. I mean,
All right.
just say. I can talk for hours about this nonsense.
It's all right. So you last left with talking about the 2600, and you were going into stores in the United States. Did they have?
Yeah,
did they sell them in malls? Can you buy a 2600 in a mall?
Yeah, you could at the time. I mean, it was amazing. It was absolutely amazing. But I mean, the music stores were like proper music stores, really well spec'd. So yeah, by the time I got to Detroit and kind of ran out of energy and money and everything, I was kind of getting okay. And then, of course, I had to come back to the UK where I didn't have a synthesizer. And then, yeah, I suppose there was this kind of hiatus. I became a drummer for a while and kind of did that as a career. I realised that I was never going to be a concert pianist. I was never that good, and there were way better pianists than me. So I took up drums and ended up in a million bands. Had one band, played in a lot of funk bands and soul bands and stuff like that, which was really great fun. And then in the 80s I had a proper band, but I bought a Simmons drum kit when they first came out. And that was the whole electronic music vibe. And any money I made from playing as a drummer, I spent on acquiring synthesizers. And then in the 80s, it was kind of strange because most of the big musician names only wanted to play. They didn't want to be bogged down in, technology at the time. So I'd kind of built up this reputation as somebody who could program drums like a drummer, because I knew how to operate a drum machine and knew what a drummer would do. He wouldn't hit everything at once. And then that kind of led into MIDI and synthesizers, and yeah, that was it really. That was game over from that point.
So I am so curious because I saw a funny picture recently, and you mentioned a bunch of bands in the 80s, and tell me this is an 80s band. Can I show them?
Yeah, go on. We should give people a laugh, shouldn't we?
Look at that guy. Okay, you got to tell us about this.
Yeah. So the story is, so we didn't, honestly, and I swear, we didn't dress like that all the time. Well, in fact, we only dressed like that on the one occasion. But we had a manager. We signed a record deal, and we were kind of, it was like, right, you got to do this sensible thing. And we were idiots. We were always mucking about. And what used to happen is we'd turn up at events and, studios and photo shoots and interviews and stuff. And our manager, it transpires, was very, she was showbiz. She wasn't music biz. And what she kept doing was she would arrive ahead of us and demand all of this stuff for her great band. And she would upset people. And we only found out about that when we went to one particular, I think it was an interview, and somebody said, she's just kind of rubbing everyone up the wrong way, and she's showbiz, and it's very different to music biz, and you need to get rid of her. And she had two phrases. One was, I can only fly in good weather, which was very bizarre because her entire family had been wiped out in an aircraft accident, which was very sad. but we were kind of confused as to why she kept using that. And the other one was, if you're not taking it seriously, I'll go. So instead of doing the decent thing and just saying, I'm sorry, but, you know, the time has come for us to part, we came up with this elaborate ruse that we would turn up to our album photo shoot, or the single photo shoot, I think it was, wearing the most ridiculous things possible, whereupon she would say, if you don't take it seriously, and we would say, well, the door's the rectangular thing in the wall. The one thing we hadn't banked on was that because she was showbiz, she took one look at these costumes, which came from the West End production of Aladdin. So they were like, these were really pucker. They were £5,000 a piece. And she took one look at them and just went, my, they're beautiful. And there was a band in the UK called Doctor and the Medics at the time who'd had this kind of one-hit wonder with was it Norman Greenbaum, Spirit in the Sky. And she just said, Doctor and the Medics, eat your heart out. You know, this is your new image. And it backfired amazingly badly on us. We took one look at the photographer and were ready to kind of make an exit to put our normal clothes on. And he went, you're not getting out of it that easily. And wheeled us over in front of what you see is bubble wrap, into this big sheet of bubble wrap, and made us pose. What was also quite funny is when we were getting dressed up, they did, when you have these kind of album photo shoots and stuff, you get makeup artists, and they deliberately don't show you what you look like because you're going to get into a debate, you know, oh, a bit more hair gel and all. I mean, it was the 80s, more hair gel. And so we couldn't see, we could only see how each other looked, and we were kind of egging each other. Yeah, more hair gel, definitely more hair. And one guy on there who's got the kind of designer stubble, that was actually cigarette ash that was kind of glued to his face by the makeup artist.
Oh, is he the one
so, yeah,
off to the right there? Yeah. Oh, my goodness.
Yes, that's my embarrassing 80s story. But what is good is that actually I've worked with loads of bands from the 80s in subsequent years, some successful, some very successful, others not. And we'll always get talking about the 80s and the 80s success and the fashion. And I can always bring these pictures out and go, I win, because no one else can compete with that.
Well, we have another picture from, I think it's from the 90s, though. Uh-oh. What's that? What are you doing there? Okay.
Is this the one I think it is?
Oh, yeah, that's
Every
Debra
Schoolboy's
Harry.
Fantasy. Yeah, so yes, I did a tour with Debbie, and she would, so I was regularly getting into trouble, mischief, and she was amazing fun. So she would basically humiliate you in front of everybody else. She would drag you out and make you kiss her butt. Kiss my butt. My nickname was KBD, which was obviously Keyboard Dave. And it was, KBD, come here, kiss my butt. And I was like, if only my friends, when, you know, like Parallel Lines came out in the 70s, if only they were here to see this. So I got somebody to take a picture.
Okay. Oh, okay.
She was a lot of fun. But you had some history, didn't you, with the whole New York CBGB scene?
I actually never played there. I played at the Sister Club at the Rat.
Okay.
Yeah. So we, the band that I played with, the last band that I played with, and did play at CBGB's a lot, but I never played there. No, I never left Boston. I never went on tour up past the Maine, very Maine, New Hampshire, Rhode Island, New York, and stuff. But I don't want to talk about that. That was another. We do have some questions, but we're going to save them for the end. Thank you, Michael John. So I'd like to actually get into what the meat of the matter is tonight, and that would be your role in Bright Sparks and how that all came about, and why we're bringing up Bright Sparks again. So tell us the story, briefly, and then
Yeah. So Chris and I, my business partner in GForce, we've been very good friends with this band iMonster, who've had like loads of hits. They're supremely cool guys, like way cooler than I could ever be. They've helped us out over the years with demos for our stuff. In fact, they did you probably won't know this film, but it's Shaun of the Dead. and they did the theme tune for Shaun of the Dead. I think it's a track called The Blue Wrath, and they used our Mtron plugin on it with all the cheesy rhythms. So we kind of got to know them through that, and at one point they came to us and said, look, we would like to do this album that pays tribute to 8 electronic music instrument pioneers. Would you be happy, would you be prepared to help us? And we were like, I mean, honestly, within a nanosecond, I was like, yeah, I get to hang out with the cool kids. So I said yes, probably without consulting Chris. But initially, it was basically giving them or loaning them gear like the 2600 and various other things, so that every track they did, so for example, with the ARP track, it was completely authentic. It was only using original ARP instruments. We used the 2500, and I did some stuff on the Odyssey for them. And then at one point we were doing a gear swap in and out, and Dean, one of the iMonster guys, just said to me, I don't suppose you fancy doing a little film to help us push the album, a bit like the YouTube stuff I do on instruments. And I immediately thought, I had taken the back of our Mini Moog off years before to take to NAMM to get Bob Moog to sign it. And on the way to the airport, I realised I forgot it and was cursing on the coach. And Chris, my partner, said, kind of calm down. He'll be there at Frankfurt, which was obviously the show in March, the Music Messe. But he wasn't, and obviously he was ill, and we never saw Bob again, and the world lost Bob. So when Dean mentioned this to me, I was like, we need to really document these stories. And I'm a kind of huge fan of people's stories. So I really just kind of set to work using various connections that I'd garnered over the years, trying to get to the original people. And obviously, we did, obviously Bob wasn't around, so we spoke to obviously Michelle Mokusa, and a friend of mine lived in New York and went to film Herb Deutsch's story. And I just thought, wouldn't it be amazing if I could get hold of Alan? Because he'd been very quiet for, like I said in the intro thing, the only story I had read was there was an online thing which was, like the whole debacle, which got removed at some point. But it was really Mark Vale's book. So I contacted Mark and I said, is there any chance you've got any connections? And Mark said, I'll talk to him. And I'm eternally grateful to Mark for that, because that just started this chain of events that ultimately led to Chris and myself just going, we need to do this. We have to do this now. And it also coincided with, I'd been talking to a couple of girls who were the daughters of Dennis Collin, or one of the daughters of Dennis Collin. And it transpired that he wanted to talk, and he was in New Hampshire. So we thought, great, we can combine the two. And we've got friends in Boston, Isotope, so we could go and see them as well. So it was, that's kind of how it came about, really.
My dad and you, I can imagine you guys must have spoken for hours and hours. It's interesting. I always thought of him as someone who's initially shy, but once you get him going on a subject, he is so enthusiastic.
He was magic. I did something that actually I recommend this to anybody. I made a mistake. I asked him a question and I made an error. And in fact, I'd asked him, so it was his first company, Nexus, was acquired by Teledyne. And I got the two companies the wrong way round. And in correcting me, he just went into this monologue. And it was the best thing I could have done, because I'm just sitting there going, keep coming. And it was, honestly, I'd have been so happy with 10 minutes of his time, just getting a couple of sound bites. But we spent the whole day there. Like I say in the intro, we spent the evening there. I was so nervous. Like, I've worked with a million artists, and I never really get nervous on that front. But what had happened with us is that the whole thing had kind of snowballed really quickly. And it was like, right, we're getting on this plane. And I only got the Etzer thing like 24 hours before. And we get to Boston, and I'd made a cock up on the hotel booking. I'd booked the night before, and they'd cancelled the successive nights because we hadn't turned up. So Chris and I ended up sleeping in this kind of handicap room, which was kind of bizarre. And then we get the car and we drive, and I was literally just knocking on your parents' apartment, and I suddenly got really nervous because here were two, 50-something-year-old people turning up at two elderly people, and all I had was a couple of conversations with your dad, and it was like, oh my God, this is really happening, and we're going to have to be on super best behaviour, which I think we were, because your mum was really checking us out. That was awesome. Your dad, as I said a million times, your dad referred to your mum as like my guardian angel all the time throughout the whole conversation. And I noticed when we walked in, Buena was kind of she was sizing us up good and proper, and quite rightly so.
She's quite a formidable lady on all of her 4'11" size.
She was utterly brilliant, and I think it was the fact that she realised that we were really trying to treat them both with respect that they totally deserved, and I think she understood how passionate we were about trying to acquire, the history, and that's when they invited us to stay for supper, which was utterly awesome because, like I say, we started talking about other things, and that conversation, there are so many things that I took away from that. My wife's an artist. I'm not an engineer, but I love synthesizers, and we work upstairs and downstairs, so I can yell at her and she can yell at me. And your dad was telling us about how he had they had the workshops together, one side and the other. And Buena, obviously, keep fit fanatic. My wife, keep fit fanatic. So there were so many things, and I remember just looking at them over dinner and thinking, it was so clear they were in love. And I just remember thinking, my God, if I'm fortunate enough to get to that age and I still have that relationship with my wife, that'll be a life well led. So yeah, when we drove away, and I've got so many anecdotes about that visit. When we drove away, I had to stop down the road, and I felt like I'd grown up a little bit during that interview, which is bizarre, isn't it? I mean, it's just bizarre that you can come from 12,000 miles away and sit in somebody's house and have that kind of epiphany, really.
Well, that's what meeting people is all about. You learn more about yourself, I think, when you make those kind of connections. And yeah,
absolutely.
Now, it's interesting. You spoke before about Nexus Teledyne. I have a very interesting little strange connection I found recently that I think I will definitely be sharing this soon in print form. So, my father worked with op amps and worked in Texas in a Nexus Teledyne, and apparently, Dick Stearns who worked with him at ARP. He was the president of ARP at one point, but started all the way back in Nexus or Teledyne. I don't remember which. Was a mutual friend of my father's, and get this, Timothy Leary.
Whoa!
No, I didn't know this. First of all, everyone has to know, my father was probably the straightest guy on the planet. He did confess that he thought he might have had a magic brownie at one of Timothy's parties, but he knew him from Harvard University. He took some courses. I know, right? He took some courses at Harvard and made friends with Timothy Leary's secretary and her husband, and then he made friends with Timothy Leary at some parties, and then Timothy ended up somehow recommending Dick Stearns, who ended up working with my dad all the way through ARP. It's kind of cool. So I found this letter, and in those days, people they had paper, carbon paper, remember? I remember carbon paper.
Yeah.
You would write you would duplicate your letters, right? I know, right? So cool, so crazy. And I found this letter in my father's things of Timothy and my dad corresponding about Dick Stearns. I'm like, is that the craziest thing? It's just, So
Wow.
yeah. So I found this letter. It's got to be. I mean, this is from 1963. Yeah, this was right after. I think it was right after I was born, before ARP started. So kind of
Wow. The thing is,
strange world.
your parents were incredibly well connected as well in the art world. I mean, I remember them telling us a couple of stories, and it was like, okay. I mean, amazing stuff.
Yeah.
I think one of my favourite stories from your dad was when he was talking about your grandfather and your great-grandfather having heart conditions and dying relatively young. So your dad decided in his 40s he was going to start running marathons. And we were like, okay, wow. But that's like proper grit, proper. And we were, just blown away, absolutely blown away. But yeah, their connections were, I mean, I loved the art stuff. And actually, when we left, your mum gave us, it was great. She just kind of disappeared for a couple of minutes, and we were like, oh, so we're going to go now. And she disappeared, and she came back with those, she gave us an enamel dish of hers each. And that takes pride of place on my window with the best view, right next to a bronze of a Keep Fit lady. I did send your dad a picture of it afterwards. Yeah. I think he chuckled.
Yeah. Oh my goodness. So, tell us about this new release. Should I give them a little sneak preview first?
Yeah. Well, yeah, I can do. I mean, this is essentially an outtake. So my plan is that I haven't got a fixed date, but we know it's going to be in a week or 10 days or a couple of weeks. What we're going to do is I'll put up an anecdote, a little bit of behind the scenes story of how some of the interviews came about. You just played that, the art one obviously is the intro there. And then a couple of days later, I'm going to put the A side up, which is effectively the 4 American companies, so Moog, ARP, Buchler, and Chamberlain. Unfortunately, I do the Chamberlain one because I know the story, and I couldn't get to the West Coast to film Richard Chamberlain, who's Harry Chamberlain's son. So we'll put that up, and then I think the following week we're going to do exactly the same with the Brits. And then I'm going to slowly start putting out some of the really interesting behind-the-scenes footage, of which this is one.
Okay. All right. So this is a world premiere, everybody. Let's see. Okay.
Philip Dodds is the genius who he developed the chroma, by the way. But he started out as a technician, as a repair technician, a service technician, and he worked his way up. I think that it's no secret that when he went, that Spielberg's group over here, they were doing that film about Close Encounters of the Third Kind. They wanted to borrow a ARP 2500 system. I had a different view with this, but the other members of the executive committee thought it was a great idea. So, all right, so we shipped one to them. Finally, we got a help request for help from somebody in the organization who didn't know what to do with it. He didn't even know whether you unpacked it and you did this and that. Would you please send somebody technical? We'll pay him. So we sent Phil Dodds for just a few weeks. So he was there, and he actually did the thing over there. And he did. He signed these little sheets. There was hourly sheets, and he handed it in. But they didn't see anything coming back. So when after they finished shooting, it turns out they were going to move the location. They were on location. They were going to move to another location and just tear down everything. So we said, well, who do I see about getting paid? It says, say to the paymaster. The paymaster is so and so. He has this little, he has a trailer and everything like that. So it turns out that the paymaster had left already for the new location. He never did get paid.
Close Encounters as a kid and thinking, what is that makes that sound? And then, of course, years later, finding out that it was Philip Dodds. And then, obviously, hearing the story from your dad, it was like, wow.
It was
A
so
moment.
cool. It was so cool seeing someone that I knew that was had been to our house and had dinner with us on a big screen. It was really neat. I went to see.
Because we're about the same age, aren't we? So we would have seen it at the same time.
Yeah.
Wow.
I'm gonna be.
Oh,
I'm gonna be
amazing.
59.
Yeah, scary, but hey-ho. We look good. He says with the most ridiculous hair
59
possible.
is the new 29 or something like that. So are you're going to be doing behind the scenes with not just my father, I'm assuming, but Bob Moog stuff and with Michelle and Bukla. Tell
There's
us.
something. Yeah, I haven't spoken to Michelle yet. I mean, Michelle's a goddess. I mean, she's just like, she is such a great ambassador. In fact, I was kind of instrumental in putting the two of you in touch. And I said to Chris when that happened, I was like, first of all, I wish I could be a fly on the wall, because I think the discussions you would have been just mind blowing. And secondly, I thought it was a beautiful thing, because it was like this kind of joining of this circle after so many years. And I think you're quite similar characters, I think. So yeah, for me it was kind of wow. So I'd love to meet. There was a couple of things that Michelle spoke about, a couple of engineers. Obviously, I need to talk to her and get her permission. But I didn't get hold of Don Buchler because he was very ill at the time. But the person who talked on his behalf was a good friend of his and an amazingly eloquent guy and a brilliant musician, Alessandro Cortini. I think Alessandro might have been the first person I interviewed, because I asked him. I'd met a brick wall with Don, and then I discovered that obviously he wasn't well. And I thought, well, Alessandro's a really good friend of his. And I knew Alessandro from years and years ago when he had this band Mod Wheel Mood. Anyway, I contacted him and he said, I'm going to be in the UK in a couple of weeks' time. I'm touring with 9 Inch Nails. Come up to the gig. I'll talk to you all day about Don. So we went up, and I think in Alessandro, he did me 2 takes. But in the one I used in Bright Sparks, there's one edit in there because he was so eloquent. It just flowed. And you could tell, he was a very, very good friend of Don's. So I think what I might do is try and put out the other version, which is quite funny because he talks about Don and the whole electric Kool-Aid thing, and maybe it was that made him design the nomenclature of the Buchler stuff in the way, and maybe that's why some of the circuitry was a mess, kind of thing. So yeah, I might put that out. But obviously, having spent the entire day and evening with your dad, there are so many really cool little bits that for me, and it was such a special day for both of us. I know that. In fact, I spoke to Chris, my partner, about it today, and he said we've been working together for like 25 years, and he said I think that was probably the highlight of working together. And it was. I think the other thing that I have to say about this project is that when I spoke to people and were trying to, I was basically begging for favors and connections. There was so much love for this project. Once I kind of was able to reveal a little bit, and people were so willing to help. And one guy I really think deserves a name check is Mark Doty.
Oh, yeah.
Mark and I were just feeding off of each other because we were discovering these tiny little, nuggets that only synth nerds would appreciate. And I was saying to Mark, do I keep it in? Do I cut it? Because it's only this. Herb Deutsch talks about him and Bob coming up with this 1 volt per octave, and then coming up with the idea of 12th of a volt resistors to get an equal temperament keyboard. And as a non-engineer, I went, wow, that just makes total sense to me. I have to keep that in. So Mark and I were like poring over every tiny detail, and he was a really, really good foil for me to, you know, should I do this? The original idea was to make the documentary 20 minutes long, which I failed miserably. But I went to interview Adrian Utley from Portishead, and he had just bought I Dream of Wires, and I just got the small edition. And he said, have you got it? And I said, yeah, I just got the small one. He said, I've got the deluxe one. I said, oh, you know, some people are saying it's too long. And he said, no, I think it's 2 days too short. And I left there and I went, that's it. Bright Sparks is going to be 2 hours. That's it. And also, I had a friend who works in TV, and he said, look, I can get this on Sky Arts or something, but you have to do it. You have to work within a treatment. And essentially, you do that, you know, coming up next, and then the recap after the adverts. And I hate all of that. And I just looked at the footage, and I was like, it basically condensed each person's story down to 6 minutes of actual information per 15 minutes. And it felt so disingenuous, because these people had given their time at a pivotal time in their lives to talk to us. And I was like, I can't condense this. You know, the other absurd thing, of course, is that when you're editing it, I mean, you know, I worked on it for over a year, so I felt like I got to know these people intimately, like they were my friends. And then, of course, I would meet them again, and they'd be like, oh, yeah, I recognize you. And I'm like, well, I know you really well. So, yeah, there's all those kind of weird elements to it. So, yeah.
So I want to just bring up one more thing before we open to some questions. I have a question, somebody ready with questions, but I just want to talk a little bit about GForce. Oh, hey, Tony. Sorry. Because we haven't really talked about that. You've mentioned working with Chris for 25 years. So I want to, I'm just going to just show a few, like a short part of this little video, and then you could talk a little bit about GForce and Oddity. Sort of running out of time, and I do want to bring questions.
Yeah,
in,
sure.
Yeah,
I mean, GForce, we started in 2000. We had a previous company that made this little thing, amongst other things, which is basically was kind of the first popular MIDI controller. Chris and I carved ourselves out of that company and started GForce. At the time when the whole plugin thing was, so we're talking year 2000, when it was really exciting. I mean, it's still exciting, but it was kind of new and fresh. And the Odyssey I'd always found intriguing. Oddity came from just the way I could put the original in front of people, seasoned musicians, and it would take them like 20 minutes to work out how to get a sound out of it, because you need to feed the waveform into the audio mixer. So we had this idea, and of course, don't forget at the time, if you wanted the Odyssey sound, the only way you could get that back then was to buy a second-hand ARP Odyssey, which were rare here, expensive. You could buy a complete dog, or you could buy a great one. You never really knew what you were buying at the time. So yeah, that was the first, I think that was the first proper synth that we modeled. And yeah, I mean, when it came out, it was like, wow, the response was, I had an amazing email from David Friend, and Dave Mash had bought it for David Friend, and he sent us a really beautiful email kind of congratulating us. So yeah, and it's kind of snowballed from there. I mean, we're a very, very small company. There's a lot going on behind the scenes at the minute that I wish I could talk about, but I can't. But there are, so we've kind of kept small. I like small. Small is beautiful and agile, and we've resisted growing on a few occasions. It's really Chris and I run it. We've got an amazing team. I'm so fortunate to be working with these people. So that's us in a nutshell.
Cool. Well, we got so much stuff to cover. If Michael John is still here, I hope so. I have a question from him, and then I want to invite everyone who is on the stream right now to ask questions. You can ask questions about Bright Sparks, of course, oddities, what other funny costumes does Dave like to wear, etc., etc. So, the first question from Michael John he wanted to know, what store in Detroit did you vet his first synth? Arnold Williams Music was where he worked in the 70s, and he was the ARP dealer.
Oh, wow, that would be amazing. Honestly, I genuinely cannot remember, but I really wish I could. I bet I know somebody who would know, though. Because we stayed with friends in Detroit. In fact, where were they? Was it Birmingham they were in? Or Dearborn? I can't remember. We went to Dearborn. I mean, that for me, that was just because all I'd done really is go on camping holidays before in the UK, which was great. And then all of a sudden it was this kind of huge road trip and like this whole huge world. It was mind-blowing. And LA at the time was the city of the future. Alas, you couldn't give me LA right now. But at the time, it was like, hey. And I was in love with Farrah Fawcett Majors and all of those kind of LA girls. So, it was pretty mind-blowing. I really wish I knew. I'm sorry, I can't answer that. But that would just be, I can tell you this much. The only thing I remember is that there was an ARP 2600 in there, and there was also a Crumar DS2. And I didn't know the difference between full polyphony or, proper articulation and divide down. And the guy in the store took the time to explain why the Crumar DS2 used divide down and it wasn't as good as an Odyssey or a 2600.
Was it a new looking?
If that's him, that would be amazing.
Was it a new looking store? Do you remember?
Yeah. Well, everything was kind of new to me. And like shopping, I mean, like I say, shopping malls just didn't exist here. It was like, wow.
All right. So, Thorsten Heinz, we would like to know what was the first aha moment that you had with the ARP?
Oh, absolutely, without a doubt, the ring modulator for me. In the duophonic mode with the Odyssey and the ring modulator, when you played that second note and you just got that raucousness, because I'd been in this punk band. My wife was like a proper punk. I was not really a punk at all. I couldn't abide those gigs because, of course, everyone was what they call here gobbing. It was awful. And it was really bad. It wasn't my scene at all. And I remember listening to stuff from Ultravox at the time. And Billy Curry, who's become a friend over the years and who helped us a lot with Oddity 2, was obviously the Ultravox keyboard player, and John Fox. John Fox is a mate. And that sound, and Billy always called the Odyssey the first punk synth because it was the only synth that could kind of compete with guitars, in that kind of just that raw power. So for me, yes, the ring modulator and the duophonic mode. I was a nightmare for the Oddity programmer because it was like, it's not right. And then he kind of worked, and it was like, it's still not right. It needs to be right. It has to be right. Anyway, he got it in the end, but it was like, for me, that was it.
Wow. Robbie Pericelli has, did I say that right? Pericelli or Pericelli? You'll have to let me know.
I think it's Pericelli.
That's what I would think. Dave, your house is on fire, and the fireman says you can only save one ARP synth. What would it be? Let's see. Let's get a full... There we go. You have a few... And you're blocking one of my favorites. Woohoo!
It works. Oh God, I love. Yeah, I can't nail it down. I mean, it's like, which kid would you rescue? Who's your favourite child?
Yeah.
I really love the 2600. Although if I had a 2500, Chris, because I know Chris is watching this, if we had a 2500, Chris, I would rescue that over the 2600. The CS80 I love, but I've got to be strong to rescue that out of the fire. And the Oberheim 8 voice for me there's something very magic about that. But I like the character of all of those things, and even the Mini Moog. I mean, especially the Mini Moog. It's just like they all complement each other so beautifully. I wish I could, Robbie. I'm sorry, Robbie. I failed you again.
Speaking of 2500s, Tony is here as well. I haven't seen his name online for a while. It's good to have you here, Tony. Michael John thinks it's
a man that owns 2500.
Oh,
wow.
that Tony Gallagher, the
okay,
moderator
Tony,
for the
yes.
2500 Facebook group. Yes, and Michael John is pretty sure that you went to his store. So, any other questions, please? Hey, Jeff. Any other questions?
I met Tony Gallagher. I did a thing on the 8 voice at Sonic for Sonic State a couple of years ago, and we were chatting away. And obviously, people know that we've got a reasonable collection. And Tony Gallagher held up his phone with some pictures, and he went, "I've got 3 of these." And I was just like, "You're Tony Gallagher, aren't you?" Because I'd obviously seen his pictures on Facebook. What an amazing job. We did have the opportunity to get, well, I told you the mad story about the 2500, but I'll only tell that again if we've got time.
We have some time.
So we're going back to the 90s. Feel free to cut me off at any time. And a friend of mine was I think he was an editor of a German keyboard magazine, a guy called Alex Weiss. And a friend of his had won an ARP Odyssey in a radio phoning competition. And he didn't play keyboards or anything like that. So Alex contacted me and said, "Oh, my friend's won this thing. How much is it worth?" And I said, "Well, it depends on the revision and the filters and the color and blah, blah, blah." So he sent me through what it was, except it wasn't an Odyssey, because I could see all these module numbers, 1047, it was just, whoa, this is not an Odyssey. So I emailed him by return saying, "This is not an Odyssey. This is a serious piece of kit." And it transpired that this person who'd won the ARP Odyssey, which wasn't an ARP Odyssey, had a friend who had told him that what he had won was junk, and he would take it off of his hands for the equivalent of, it was 400 Deutschmarks at the time, or it might have been the equivalent of £400. So I went mental. I ran round every single person I could and tried to get as much money as I could together to offer this guy a fair price, which at the time was probably about £5,500. And I was going to drive to Berlin. It was Munich, actually. I was going to drive to Munich to pick this up. But in the time it took my friend to finish work and go and visit his friend who'd won the ARP Odyssey, his other not very friendly friend had gone around there and taken it off his hands. That was as close as I ever came. And the only other time we had was Vincent Gallo was selling one, which I think Tony Gallagher ended up buying. But that was way too much money for me, for us.
Yes, and that's another story. Andrew Ward would like to rescue that Quadra from you, Dave, especially if you leave it behind. So,
Yeah. Andrew's been to the studio. In fact, Robbie has as well. Andrew can come and play it. Once this COVID drama's over, he can come down and play it.
Okay. So Michael John would like to know what modern instrument do you think can best replicate your ARP 2600? I'm not sure if mode instrument. I'm sorry, John. I think it's what modern instrument do you think can best replicate your ARP 2600?
I really like. I mean, obviously, I think the Korg 2600 is good. I didn't get in time to get one, but I probably know 5 people who did, and I'm very envious of them. Our one is beautiful. It's not the treble clef model. It's the old Tonus logo model. And in fact, when something happened to it, we took it to our repair guy, who's brilliant, Kent, and he said that actually a lot of the componentry is to do with the grey. Look, do we call it the grey Meanie or the grey Marvin? It's a lot of the componentry is to do with that, and I think that's what gives that a kind of special sound. I'd really like the Korg one. I've heard it in the flesh, but honestly, I think if I had the money, I really like what Phil Sirocco does. I think I would probably, I would like to support. You know, he's a kind of lone wolf again, and a great historian, and I think I would probably like to support somebody like Phil.
Yeah, he's quite the master. He's quite the master
Yeah.
at what he does. Yeah. Thorsten, Dave, what were your influences for music when you grew up? This would be interesting to me since we're the same age.
Yeah, loads. I mean, I talked about the Stevie stuff. I mean, that, I don't know. I mean, obviously, you know, like I say, I did the prog stuff, but it was like too intellectual in a way. I mean, I love the sounds, but it was because it was all classical based, and I was bored of the classical scene, you know, doing all my grades and competitions and stuff. I also had a bizarre shooting accident when I was younger and lost the use of my thumb for quite a while, which is a whole nother story. So that put paid to any dreams I may or may not have had as a concert pianist. But once I discovered Talking Book, I think everything changed. And then that led me to get into Herbie Hancock. My first ever gig was Herbie Hancock. That was Feats Don't Fail Me Now album. And Bernie Worrell, I've got a shrine to Bernie over there. The Funkadelic stuff. I don't know, it just talked to me. And I think what happened then is because, you know, I didn't have a synthesizer, that translated into, it was a groove. I think the thing is, all the prog stuff was very cerebral. And then the minute I started listening to funk, Ramsey Lewis, I mean, there's just mountains, it made me want to move. And this disconnect between my brain and my body, and I'm a pretty bad dancer, but, you know, hey, when you're young, it doesn't matter. In fact, even when you're older, it doesn't matter. Dad dancing now. But yeah, so that really lived with me. And then what happened in the 80s, I got the chance to work at Martin Rushent's studio, and he produced Human League and stuff. And a friend of mine was an engineer there, and I would get the call to go and sort out instruments, and that kind of got me into bands like Scritti Politti with that tight syncopated synthesizer work. And Dave Gamson's a kind of friend. Well, he's a friend, and I think he's amazing. The stuff he's done subsequent to Scritti with Michel and Deocello, it just grabs me. It just grabs me. And yeah, so very much on that kind of tip. And then later on, I ended up so on the Debbie tour, I met a guy called Carl Hyde. And Carl Hyde was the guitarist, because Chris Stein was a great guitarist, but he wasn't in the best of shape. And Carl was amazing. And then Carl said to me, would you like to come and help us with our band? And that was Underworld. And that changed again everything. It was, you know, non-cerebral. It was all about dance, and that changed everything. And I've helped them on and off since probably 1993. It's quite eclectic, isn't it?
It is, and I've noticed that about a lot of synth players. That one of the things I really enjoy speaking to, as you would say, this whole lot, is that it's the eclectic tastes that are out there. I mean, I grew up in classical, and then I think my first popular music at home were all the ARP users, you know, Stevie and Herbie and the Who were at my house. I mean, not at my house literally, but the records and stuff. And then I had my punk rock days as well, and all that good stuff.
Yeah, I like your Lou Reed story. I can imagine your mum being horrified.
Now I have to tell you. No, that's another.
Yeah, please.
We don't have much time. All right, so let's go to Alex Ball. So Alex wants to know if Frank Ellis has been on the phone recently.
Oh
Is this an
God!
in-joke?
So
You're gonna
it's a
have to tell
story.
all the kids now.
Yeah, and I have to say, Alex, I love you, but I hate you. In fact, what I want to do to you, Alex, is kill you, eat you, and possess all your power. I have never had so much fun in a day when Alex came to film his stuff for his our studio for his documentary, and I felt so bad because he was filming himself with an overhead camera, and I had a 600-watt light bulb, and he pushed the stand over, and all of a sudden we smelt burning, and then we looked at his camera and it had melted. But the really good thing about that was, first of all, we managed to save the footage, but secondly, I felt so bad I volunteered to help him film the next person, which was Jeremy Hill. And I love the pro soloist, and the ability to go and talk to Jeremy or listen to Jeremy Hill was like a moment. So yes, no, the story with Frank Ellis is that my business partner Chris worked for Yes. Chris had an amazing life in the 80s. He toured with everybody, Keith Emerson, Wakeman, Aztec Camera, Blow Monkeys, then Jericho. And he was in the south of France doing an album with John Anderson, and the phone went, and he heard the voice he heard somebody say who they were asking for John. So he said to John, somebody called Frank on the phone for you. And John said, I don't know anyone called Frank. Hang up. So Chris did. And then the person rang again, and it transpired it wasn't Frank Ellis, it was Vangelis.
That's good. Oh, this is great. You tell the best stories. You really do. It's such a pleasure. It's always a pleasure. How can we see the outtakes? I have a link to the website at the end. I just want to make sure Bright Sparks /movie that goes to.
Yeah, so it won't be going live until mid-Feb.
Okay.
But when it does, it'll be on the GForce site, but also we've got this kind of GForce Software TV YouTube site, and that's where it'll be, and also on the GForce site. I think, in all honesty, it's going to be probably about the 13th or 14th of Feb. There's a few things that we're trying to get organised. But yes, I just kind of figured that, I mean, look, we're living in turmoil at the minute, lockdowns, and it just struck me. I was just like, we need to listen to people again to develop some degree of empathy. And of all the people to listen to, these are the people that we need to listen and learn from. So yeah, it was like, let's just give this away.
And I'm really, really looking forward to. Oh, hello, Kendall. We're almost done. Sorry. Did you have a question? Kendall Scott is here. I just want to see. All right, I'm putting them on the spot.
Question
all right,
now.
So what I'm going to do, I just want to make just a short announcement, and then we're going to sign off in a moment. I'm putting up a link again to the page where one can donate to the foundation. As always, we are looking for some funding. We have, I don't know if you can see the instruments behind me, but the instruments behind me are going to be part of the ARP for All collection, which we will be making a formal announcement in the next few weeks. But this is going to be a collection of synthesizers, of ARP, mostly ARP vintage, some remakes. It's going to be a dedicated collection in Boston, and then hopefully we'll tour that collection around to different educational venues. So everyone will have an opportunity to play some of these instruments, because we are very, as we know, we don't have all the instruments either. It is hard to obtain them and to take care of them and all that. So please, if you can, the link is in the comments if you are able to make a donation. Thank you so much for everyone for coming. Thank you so much, Dave Spiers. Thanks, Chris.
I
know you're there and you're behind the scenes, and you are a big part of this, even though you're not on camera right now. So I just want to thank you, and thank you all for your continued support. We're going to end with just a little jam from a Pro DGX and our guest here. So please don't go away. Just another couple of moments. And again, thank you for all of your support.